First story, Clayton and Donna Lee's story, 2005. The hum was always the first sign, a low thrumming vibration that resonated deep in my bones, more felt than heard. It started subtly like a distant engine, but quickly grew, filling the air, the room, my very skull until everything else faded away. Then came the pressure, a crushing force building behind my eyes, a squeezing sensation as if the air itself was turning solid. I'd gripped the sides of the bed, knuckles white, trying to fight it, trying to scream, but my voice would be trapped, a silent echo in the growing silence of the world around me. This had been my reality for as long as I could remember, these episodes of missing time, waking up disoriented, in places I didn't recognize, with a gnawing sense of violation I couldn't explain. It was always a solitary terror, a burden I carried alone, shrouded in secrecy and shame. Explaining to anyone what was happening was impossible. The words themselves felt inadequate, ridiculous even. Then Donna came into my life, a bright spark in the perpetual twilight of my fear. With her, the world felt less menacing, less isolating. We built a life together, a haven of normalcy against the backdrop of my personal nightmare. But the hum didn't discriminate. The night it happened to us both, parked by the old lake after a late movie, the familiar thrum began, but this time, Donna felt it too. Her eyes widened, mirroring my own growing panic, her hand tightening in mine. The world dissolved around us, the familiar lakeside scene replaced by an unnerving void. When we awoke, tangled together in the truck's cab, miles from where we'd been, the unspoken terror solidified into a horrifying truth. We were not alone in this, and whatever was happening to us together. That shared abduction shattered the fragile illusion of normalcy we'd built. The missing time grew longer, the aftereffects more pronounced. Donna, seeking answers, agreed to hypnosis. What she unearthed in the depths of her subconscious chilled us both to the core. Images of cold, sterile rooms, of tall, shadowy figures, and the horrifying sensation of being examined, probed. She saw them looking at something inside her, a focused, clinical interest that suggested a purpose far more unsettling than random abduction. Were they studying us? Our genetics? The fear that had always been a solitary torment became a shared, amplified dread, a terrifying certainty that we were part of something vast, inexplicable, and profoundly dangerous. And we were still living it, still scared. Clayton had always felt like an outsider in Harmony Creek, a small town nestled deep in the rustling cornfields of Ohio. Life moved at a slow, predictable pace there, seasons turning with reliable monotony, the rhythm of combines in the fall and cicadas in the summer defining the year. But beneath the surface of small-town tranquility, a different kind of rhythm pulsed in Clayton's life, an erratic, terrifying arrhythmia of missing time and unexplained dread. He worked at the local garage, grease under his fingernails and the smell of motor oil clinging to his clothes, finding a semblance of grounding in the tangible world of engines and steel. Yet the unsettling silence of the abductions always lurked beneath his constructed normalcy, a constant threat to his fragile peace. Donna, on the other hand, was Harmony Creek born and bred, sunlight and warmth personified. She ran the town's only diner, Donna's Delights, her laughter as bright and welcoming as the neon sign in the window. She saw the quiet storm brewing beneath Clayton's reserved exterior and was drawn to it, a moth to a flickering flame. Where Clayton was shadowed and cautious, Donna was open and vibrant, her spirit a defiant spark against the encroaching darkness he carried. She brought color into his muted world, a sense of belonging he'd never known. Their relationship blossomed amidst milkshakes and late-night diner shifts, a quiet love built on shared glances and comfortable silences. Donna, initially unaware of Clayton's hidden burden, grounded him in the present, offering a respite from the recurring nightmares that haunted his past. She represented everything normal, everything safe, everything he desperately craved. He confided in her slowly, hesitantly, the words about missing time and strange occurrences feeling alien even to his own ears. Donna listened with unwavering patience, her brow furrowed with concern, but never with disbelief. When the abductions began to encompass them both, the world Donna represented, the safe haven they'd created, shattered. The shared experience, while terrifying, forged an unbreakable bond between them, a desperate pact against an unseen enemy. Donna, pragmatic and fiercely protective, became determined to understand what was happening. It was her initiative, her unwavering resolve, that led them down the path of hypnotic regression, seeking answers in the murky depths of their own minds. Clayton, driven by years of solitary fear and a desperate need for control, sought understanding as a means of survival. Donna, motivated by her love for Clayton and a dawning sense of personal violation, wanted answers not just for him, but for herself, for their future together. They stood together, two figures silhouetted against the vast, unknowable darkness of alien abduction, their small-town existence irrevocably altered, their lives forever bound to a terrifying cosmic mystery. Hypnosis unlocked more than just fractured recollections. Donna saw symbols etched into the cold alien walls, intricate glyphs she instantly recognized. They were identical to the strange markings Clayton had compulsively drawn since he was a boy, inexplicable patterns that now chillingly clarified everything. Their abductions weren't random acts, they were a terrifyingly deliberate invitation. The chilling realization that their abductions were invited, not random, became the new terrifying focal point. Their immediate goal shifted from simply surviving the episodes to understanding why. What did the glyphs mean? What kind of invitation had Clayton unknowingly extended since childhood? The internet became their rabbit hole, a late-night descent into forums and obscure websites dedicated to alien encounters, a desperate search for similar symbols, for any clue to decipher the alien language now burned into their minds. The first obstacle was the overwhelming lack of concrete information. The glyphs were unlike anything documented in mainstream abduction literature. Skepticism was another wall. Local libraries and universities offered no answers, only polite dismissals and concerned glances. They were isolated, their terrifying secret feeling increasingly heavy in the mundane reality of Harmony Creek. Donna, ever practical, focused on the tangible. She started meticulously documenting every abduction detail, every physical mark, every fragmented memory, hoping to find a pattern, a logic. Clayton, haunted by the glyph's familiarity, retreated further inward, poring over old drawings from his childhood, searching for a key in the chaotic scribbles of his younger self. The strain was evident. Sleepless nights, whispered arguments, the constant undercurrent of fear testing the limits of their bond. A small subplot emerged when Donna, during her online research, stumbled upon a local forum mentioning strange lights near Harmony Creek and shared experiences of missing time. A flicker of hope ignited. Were they truly alone, or were others in their community experiencing something similar? The possibility of finding allies, of sharing the burden, became a new, desperate motivation. Despite the growing fear and relational pressure, a new determination solidified. They would decipher the glyphs, understand the invitation, and find out why they, of all people, were chosen. The initial terror was morphing into a fragile resolve, a fight for answers in a world that seemed to offer only terrifying questions. The inciting incident arrived not in the cold, sterile silence of an alien room, but in the dusty, forgotten corners of Clayton's own past. He was helping his mother clear out the attic of their old farmhouse, a space crammed with forgotten relics of generations past, when his fingers brushed against something unexpected behind a loose floorboard. Beneath the creaking wood, nestled in a shallow cavity, lay a small wooden box. Inside, amidst yellowed photographs and faded letters, were stacks of drawings. Not the childish crayon scribbles of a typical boy, but intricate pencil sketches filled with swirling lines and geometric shapes. Glyphs. The same glyphs Donna had seen in her hypnosis, the same unsettling symbols that had haunted Clayton's subconscious since childhood. His heart slammed against his ribs. He recognized the childish hand, shaky and unsure, yet undeniably his own. He had drawn these. He had created the invitation. The implications crashed over him like a tidal wave. This wasn't just a random occurrence, a cosmic accident. He had played a part, unknowingly, in attracting these beings to their lives, to Donna's life. Guilt and a terrifying sense of responsibility warred with the chilling wonder of discovery. He raced downstairs, the box clutched in his hands, his breath ragged. Donna, initially confused by his frantic state, paled as she examined the drawings. The glyphs were undeniable, staring back at them from Clayton's childhood, a tangible link between his past and their present nightmare. The abstract research became terrifyingly real, a personal, inescapable legacy. The urgency to decipher the symbols, to understand the invitation's true nature, became paramount. Their focus sharpened, their fear intensified, but now it was laced with a desperate need for answers. The dusty attic, the forgotten box, Clayton's childhood drawings, these mundane objects had become the catalyst, igniting a desperate race against time to understand the terrifying invitation they had unwittingly extended, and to confront whatever awaited them at the end of this chilling, self-authored path. The discovery of the drawings was a seismic shift, transforming their fear from passive dread to active urgency. Clayton was consumed by guilt, the childish drawings now heavy anchors of responsibility. He had unknowingly opened a door, and Donna was now caught in the draft. His primary motivation became protection, a fierce desire to shield Donna from the consequences of his past invitation, even if it meant facing the unknown alone. Donna, initially reeling from the revelation, channeled her fear into action. The glyphs were no longer abstract symbols, they were a code, a language that held the key to their nightmare. Her motivation solidified into a relentless pursuit of understanding. She would decipher the invitation, not just for Clayton, but for herself, for any chance of reclaiming their lives. The diner, once her sanctuary, became a war room, scattered with research papers, glyph charts, and endless cups of lukewarm coffee. Their first challenge was deciphering the alien language. Books on cryptography, ancient symbols, and even fringe linguistics cluttered their small living room. They hit dead end after dead end, the glyphs stubbornly resisting any conventional interpretation. The silence of their research was broken one evening by a knock on the diner door after closing hours. Standing on the porch was a woman, older, with sharp, intelligent eyes and an air of quiet authority. She introduced herself as Professor Amelia Reed, a retired linguist who had seen Donna's post on the local forum about strange symbols. Professor Reed, intrigued and surprisingly open-minded, offered her expertise. Her arrival was a beacon of hope, a potential ally in their desperate quest for answers. Professor Reed's presence injected a new dynamic into their struggle. Her academic approach contrasted with Donna's pragmatic determination and Clayton's internal turmoil, creating a friction that was both challenging and potentially fruitful. As they delved deeper into the glyphs, a new subplot emerged, Whispers in Harmony Creek. Other residents, emboldened by Donna's forum post, began sharing their own unsettling experiences, missing time, strange lights in the sky. The isolation they had felt was cracking, replaced by a fragile sense of community, but also by a growing unease. Were the aliens aware of their research? Were they watching Harmony Creek more closely now? Deciphering the invitation was no longer just about personal survival. It could have consequences for their entire town, consequences they were only beginning to comprehend. Deciphering the glyphs became an obsession, consuming their days and nights. Professor Reed, while invaluable, brought her own set of tensions. Her academic detachment clashed with Donna's emotional urgency and Clayton's simmering guilt, creating friction within their small research group. The stakes escalated with each fragmented translation. The glyphs weren't just an invitation, they were a contract, a cosmic agreement unknowingly initiated by Clayton's childhood drawings, binding him, and now Donna, to the alien beings. The community subplot deepened as more Harmony Creek residents came forward, their shared experiences creating a fragile support network, but also a breeding ground for paranoia. Whispers turned into open fear, the town's idyllic facade cracking under the weight of shared dread. This local panic drew unwanted attention, skeptical authorities, sensationalist media, adding another layer of pressure and danger. Clayton's guilt intensified as the contract's implications became clearer. It wasn't just observation. The glyphs suggested a deeper purpose, something tied to their genetic lineage, something that put Donna directly in harm's way. He became increasingly withdrawn, pushing Donna away in a misguided attempt to protect her, creating a painful rift between them just when they needed each other most. Donna, torn between her desire to understand and her fear for Clayton and her community, faced an impossible dilemma: push forward and risk further alien intrusion, or retreat and remain trapped in terrifying ignorance. Professor Reed's breakthrough came in hushed whispers over crackling lines of ancient texts. Hidden within the complex glyph patterns, she isolated a recurring symbol, a counterglyph. It wasn't a full translation, more a desperate hunch pieced together from linguistic anomalies and forgotten folklore, but it suggested a loophole, a way to contest the contract. A perilous gamble, a whisper of defiance against a cosmic agreement, but it was a chance. This fragile hope became the turning point. Seeing Donna's raw fear, yet the unwavering strength in her eyes as she listened to Professor Reed's theory, something shifted within Clayton. The paralyzing guilt began to recede, replaced by a fierce, protective determination. He wouldn't be defined by his childhood mistake. He would fight. He would exploit this loophole, sever the contract, protect Donna. Donna, witnessing Clayton's transformation, felt her terror sharpen into a chilling resolve. They were no longer passive victims. Armed with a desperate hope and a dangerous plan, they were ready to confront their abductors, to gamble everything on this single, fragile counterglyph. The climax was rapidly approaching. Armed with the counterglyph theory, Clayton and Donna prepared for a confrontation they barely understood. Professor Reed, now fully invested, worked tirelessly, translating fragments, piecing together rituals, ancient defenses against something not quite defined, but undeniably hostile. Their small diner, usually filled with the comforting aroma of coffee and pancakes, now smelled of old paper and ozone from Professor Reed's strange equipment. The air crackled with a nervous energy. Their preparation wasn't without its challenges. The abductions intensified. They were no longer just gaps in time. They were vivid, terrifying experiences, almost as if the aliens were probing their minds, testing their resolve. One night, Clayton awoke paralyzed, the familiar shadow figures looming closer than ever, their black eyes burning into him. He tried to focus, to visualize the counterglyph, a desperate mental shield against the encroaching darkness. For a moment, the pressure receded, the shadows flickered. It was a small victory, a fragile confirmation that the counterglyph might hold power. But the resistance wasn't solely against the unseen. Sheriff Brody, initially dismissive of the town's alien hysteria, became increasingly agitated by the growing panic in Harmony Creek and the media attention it attracted. He confronted Donna, his skepticism laced with thinly veiled threats, demanding they cease their nonsense before it ruined the town. It was a minor confrontation, but it highlighted the earthly opposition they also faced, the disbelief and fear of their own community. Amidst the escalating tension, a small resolution emerged within Harmony Creek. A group of residents, inspired by Donna's quiet defiance, organized a town meeting, not to panic, but to support each other, to share information, to face the unknown together. It was a fragile alliance, born of fear, but it was a tangible act of human connection against an inhuman threat. This small spark of unity offered a sliver of hope, a reminder that they weren't entirely alone in this fight. Professor Reed, poring over ancient texts, made a chilling discovery. The counterglyph wasn't just a defense, it was a challenge. Using it would not simply repel the aliens, it would provoke them, a direct act of defiance that could escalate the situation beyond their control. She warned them, her voice grave, her eyes filled with a mixture of admiration and apprehension. The climax they were approaching was not just a confrontation. It was a gamble, a roll of cosmic dice with unimaginable stakes. The stage was set, the players positioned, and the final act was about to begin. The air in Harmony Creek grew thick with an almost tangible dread. The static on the radio was no longer intermittent. It was a constant, grating presence, a relentless reminder of the unseen observers. The abductions intensified, blurring the lines between waking and dreaming, leaving Clayton and Donna perpetually exhausted, their nerves frayed. Sleep offered no escape, only deeper incursions into their minds, vivid landscapes of cold, metallic rooms and probing eyes. The final obstacle was not just understanding the contract, but surviving the agonizing wait for the inevitable confrontation, their minds and bodies stretched to breaking point. Sheriff Brody's skepticism crumbled, replaced by a palpable fear that mirrored the town's. He arrived at the diner, not with threats this time, but with a desperate plea. Harmony Creek was on edge, people were talking about leaving, businesses were closing. He couldn't offer belief, but he offered resources, a desperate, unspoken alliance born of shared fear. He represented the human challenge, the struggle to maintain order and sanity in the face of the incomprehensible. His presence heightened the stakes, extending the potential fallout beyond just Clayton and Donna to their entire community. The weight of Professor Reed's warning settled heavily upon them. The counterglyph was a gamble, a cosmic Hail Mary. Using it could sever the contract, or it could provoke a retaliation they couldn't even imagine. Donna looked at Clayton, his eyes reflecting a mixture of fear and grim determination. Their shared journey had reached its precipice. Everything they had endured, every fragment of memory, every deciphered glyph, every whispered fear, had led them to this final, terrifying choice. Their narrative threads were taut, stretched to their limit, ready to snap or to weave together into an unforeseen resolution. The night the climax arrived, the static on the radio crescendoed into a deafening roar, the air itself buzzing with an unseen energy. The familiar hum intensified, shaking the diner, rattling the windows, pressing down on them with an almost unbearable weight. Clayton, his hand trembling, traced the counterglyph onto a piece of scrap metal, the makeshift symbol glowing faintly in the oppressive darkness. Donna stood beside him, her gaze unwavering, her hand clasped tightly in his. This was it. As Clayton raised the glyph, a blinding light flooded the diner, hotter and brighter than any earthly sun. The hum reached a fever pitch, then abruptly ceased, replaced by an unnerving silence. The air crackled, the silence stretched, and for a terrifying moment nothing happened. Then a wave of nausea washed over them, followed by a profound sense of emptiness. The oppressive presence, the feeling of being watched, lifted, vanished as if it had never been. Outside, the lights faded, the static died down, and an unnatural calm settled over Harmony Creek. Sheriff Brody, along with a small group of townsfolk who had gathered near the diner, watched in stunned silence. The immediate threat was gone. The abduction stopped. The contract, it seemed, was broken, but the silence that followed was heavy with uncertainty. Had they truly won? Or had they merely provoked something far greater, something now observing from a distance, its intentions unknown? Clayton and Donna stood together in the quiet diner, shaken but whole. The fear remained, etched into their souls, but now it was tempered with a fragile sense of agency. They had faced the unimaginable, and they had survived. Professor Reed, watching them, nodded slowly, a complex mixture of relief and lingering apprehension in her eyes. Their story was real, their fear was real, and their courage, in the face of cosmic terror, was real too. If you've ever felt a shadow in the corner of your eye, a hum in the silence, remember Clayton and Donna Lee. Their story is a testament to the enduring strength of the human spirit against the vast unknown. Share their story. Keep watch, and never stop looking up. The silence after the blinding light was profound, a stark contrast to the constant hum that had permeated their lives for so long. Harmony Creek slowly began to heal, the fear receding like a tide, replaced by a quiet resilience. Donna's Diner became a symbol of their shared ordeal, a place where whispered stories and hesitant hopes mingled with the familiar scent of coffee and comfort food. Clayton and Donna, forever marked by their experience, found a deeper strength in each other, their bond forged in the crucible of cosmic terror. They remained in Harmony Creek, guardians of a secret they now shared with their community, forever vigilant, forever changed. Professor Reed, drawn into a world she only theorized about, continued her research, driven by a newfound purpose, her academic curiosity now intertwined with a profound sense of responsibility. The moral of their story isn't about fear, but about courage. The courage to face the unknown, the courage to fight for what you love, even when the odds seem impossibly stacked against you. Perhaps the observers are still out there, watching. Perhaps the silence is just a pause. But Clayton and Donna taught us that even in the face of cosmic indifference, human connection and resilience can be a defiant light in the darkness. Their story is a warning, but also an inspiration. Remember their names. Share their tale. And should you ever hear the hum, look to the sky and know that you are not alone. Second story, alien abduction. Mind erased. Rio de Janeiro, 1981. A nation breathed under the shadow of a military regime, yet life vibrated with an irrepressible energy, a testament to the Brazilian spirit. Amidst the thick, humid air and the ever-present rhythm of samba resonating from the favelas, Antonio La Rubia, a diligent mechanic, sought refuge in the intricate world of electronics within his modest workshop. His calloused hands, perpetually stained with grease and solder, possessed a quiet mastery, mending radios and harboring dreams of a more promising future. But the oppressive heat of a typical Brazilian night was about to be abruptly replaced by an unnatural, piercing chill. An otherworldly light descended upon his humble workshop, not the familiar glow of the moon or the distant city lights, but an ethereal luminescence accompanied by an unsettling, high-pitched hum that seemed to vibrate through the very foundations of his being. In an instant, Antonio's ordinary evening fractured, plunging him into an unimaginable ordeal. He was violently pulled into a chilling encounter with beings that defied human comprehension, emotionless figures inhabiting a cold, sterile, metallic realm. Analyzed, probed, and subjected to silent, telepathic commands demanding oblivion, Antonio became an unwilling participant in an alien abduction. This narrative is his story, a profoundly personal and terrifying account wrenched from the annals of history. Not merely tales of unexplained phenomena, but of the enduring human battle to reconcile the mundane with the utterly inconceivable. What unfolds when suppressed memories claw their way back to the surface, whispering of a reality far more disturbing and profound than the darkest of nightmares. Rio de Janeiro in 1981 was a city of stark contrasts, a vibrant metropolis struggling under the weight of a military dictatorship. The golden beaches and lush landscapes masked societal fractures, where opulent neighborhoods bordered sprawling favelas teeming with life and struggle. In these labyrinthine communities, resilience was not merely a virtue, but a necessity for survival. Life was lived in the moment, imbued with the pulse of samba and the fervor of football, yet shadowed by political oppression and economic hardship. Antonio La Rubia was a product of this world, his existence woven into the fabric of his favela. More than just a mechanic, he was a keystone in his community, a reliable figure who mended not just machines but also the frayed edges of daily life for his neighbors. His small workshop was a sanctuary of sorts, filled with the comforting aroma of soldering flux and the quiet hum of transformers, a stark contrast to the boisterous world outside. Within these walls, Antonio wasn't just fixing radios. He was piecing together a sense of order in a chaotic world, driven by an innate curiosity and a yearning for something beyond the confines of his present reality. He was a man of quiet observation, his dark eyes reflecting a deep well of unspoken dreams and anxieties. Beneath his practical exterior lay a mind that constantly questioned, that yearned to understand the intricate workings of the universe, both mechanical and perhaps something far grander. His motivations were simple yet profound: to provide for himself, to contribute to his community, and to silently pursue the elusive promise of a brighter horizon. This ordinary man, grounded in the realities of his world, was about to be thrust into an extraordinary and terrifying encounter, one that would shatter his perception of reality and irrevocably alter the course of his life. The blinding light was merely the prelude. Antonio's terror escalated within the frigid alien vessel as emotionless beings silently probed his deepest mind, leaving a chilling, inescapable command: forget everything. Years later, fractured nightmares relentlessly clawed their way back, hinting at a violation profoundly beyond human comprehension. A cold, metallic presence secretly within him, an alien implant, its true purpose a terrifying, unknowable enigma locked deep within his very flesh. Waking in his workshop, bathed in the mundane Rio sunlight, Antonio desperately tried to convince himself the nightmarish ordeal was just that, a nightmare. Yet, the chilling sterility of the metallic room, the black, emotionless eyes, and the silent command to forget lingered like phantom sensations, refusing to dissipate with the morning heat. Doubt gnawed at him, a subtle dissonance in his otherwise ordinary routine. He threw himself back into his work, the familiar comfort of soldering and circuits a temporary balm against the unsettling memories that flickered at the edge of his awareness. Days turned into weeks, and the unease intensified. Fragmented images and visceral sensations resurfaced unbidden. Cold metal against his skin, the buzzing hum, the sense of violation. Sleep offered no respite, haunted by disturbing dreams mirroring the abduction, each vivid fragment chipping away at his carefully constructed denial. His goal shifted from forgetting to understanding, a reluctant acceptance that something profound and terrifying had invaded his reality. The first obstacle emerged as a wall of internal resistance, the fear of facing the unimaginable truth, the dread of being perceived as insane if he dared to speak of it. Driven by a desperate need for answers, Antonio eventually confided in a trusted friend, a local barber named Chico, known for his open mind and worldly wisdom. Chico listened intently, his initial skepticism slowly giving way to concern as Antonio recounted the fragmented memories. While Chico offered empathy and support, he also cautioned against chasing shadows, urging Antonio to focus on the tangible present. This interaction highlighted a new obstacle, the challenge of external validation, the inherent difficulty in convincing others of an experience so far outside the realm of conventional understanding. Antonio was alone in his quest, armed only with fragmented memories and a growing sense of dread, embarking on a solitary path into the unnerving unknown. Life in the favela, once familiar and comforting, began to feel subtly, then overtly, hostile to Antonio. The vibrant sounds of samba now echoed with an undercurrent of unease. The crowded streets felt claustrophobic, and even his workshop, his sanctuary, seemed to shrink around him, the shadows deepening with a sinister edge. The fragmented memories, once easily dismissed, intensified, no longer whispering at the edges of his consciousness, but screaming for attention. Nightmares became relentless, vivid replays of the abduction, each detail sharper, more visceral than the last. Sleep offered no escape. It became a terrifying descent into the metallic room, the black eyes, the cold touch of the beings. He would wake in a cold sweat, heart pounding, the lingering scent of ozone clinging to the air in his small room, even though logically he knew it couldn't be real. But the dreams bled into his waking hours, intrusive flashbacks assaulting him during the day. A sudden flash of blinding light while soldering, the chilling hum of machinery replacing the comforting buzz of his tools. His concentration shattered, his hands trembled, and the delicate work he once performed with precision became fraught with errors. One sweltering afternoon, while repairing a complex television set for a wealthy customer in Copacabana, a particularly vivid flashback overwhelmed him. He was suddenly back in the alien room, the telepathic voice echoing in his mind, the metallic table cold beneath him. He recoiled instinctively, knocking over a tray of delicate vacuum tubes, sending them crashing to the expensive parquet floor. The customer, initially patient, erupted in fury, accusing him of incompetence and demanding compensation. Humiliated and deeply shaken, Antonio returned to his favela, the weight of his disrupted reality crushing him. This public failure, this undeniable consequence of his inner turmoil, became the inciting incident. It was no longer just unease or nightmares. His abduction experience was now directly impacting his livelihood, his ability to function in the world. The incident served as a stark wake-up call, shattering his denial completely. He could no longer ignore the truth. Something profound and terrifying had happened to him, and it was actively destroying his life. Driven by a desperate need to regain control, to understand the source of his unraveling, Antonio knew he had to confront the memories, to seek answers, no matter how frightening the journey might be. His goal became clear: to unearth the truth of what happened that night, even if it meant facing unimaginable horrors. The humiliation in Copacabana was more than just a lost job, it was a catalyst. Word spread quickly in the close-knit favela about Antonio's episode, and soon customers became scarce, whispering about his strange behavior. His already precarious income dwindled, adding financial strain to his mounting emotional distress. His workshop, once a refuge, now felt like a cage, trapping him with his escalating anxieties and fragmented memories. His motivation to understand the abduction solidified from a desperate yearning to a vital necessity. His sanity and livelihood depended on it. Seeking solace and guidance, Antonio turned to Dona Elena, an elderly woman in his favela known for her wisdom and knowledge of traditional remedies and folklore. Dona Elena, with her kind eyes and knowing smile, listened patiently to Antonio's disjointed account. Unlike Chico, she didn't dismiss his story outright. Instead, she spoke of ancient spirits, of unseen realms, and of energies that science couldn't explain. She suggested that Antonio's experience might be more than a simple nightmare, hinting at a deeper, perhaps otherworldly intrusion. Dona Elena introduced Antonio to a new path, the realm of spiritual healing and alternative knowledge. She spoke of a curandero, a traditional healer living in the hills overlooking Rio, rumored to possess insights into the unseen world. This encounter opened a new subplot, a journey into the mystical and spiritual undercurrents of Brazilian culture, a stark contrast to the cold, metallic reality of his abduction. Antonio, desperate for any answers, felt a flicker of hope, a fragile belief that perhaps, in these unconventional realms, he might find the key to unlocking the terrifying enigma of his past and reclaiming his future. The quest for understanding was no longer just about memory. It was about survival in a world that suddenly felt profoundly alien. Antonio's journey to the curandero was arduous, a trek up winding paths into the verdant hills, leaving the familiar chaos of the favela far behind. The curandero's dwelling, nestled deep within the lush foliage, exuded an aura of ancient mystery, a world away from the metallic sterility of Antonio's nightmares. The air here was thick with the scent of herbs and burning incense, the sounds of nature replacing the urban clamor. The curandero himself, a man with eyes that seemed to hold centuries of knowledge, listened intently to Antonio's story, nodding slowly as the mechanic recounted his abduction and the chilling implant. Unlike the skeptical doctors, or even the well-meaning Chico, the curandero did not dismiss Antonio's experience. He spoke of star beings, of ancient pacts, and of energies that flowed through the earth and sky, unseen by most. He confirmed Dona Elena's suspicions, suggesting the implant was not merely a physical object, but a conduit, a link to these otherworldly forces. This revelation presented Antonio with a profound dilemma. Was he to pursue a scientific, perhaps futile, search for a physical object, or embrace a spiritual path, delving into realms beyond conventional understanding? The curandero proposed a different approach, a ritualistic cleansing to sever the alien connection and, perhaps, reveal the implant's true nature. This path, while offering a glimmer of hope, also introduced a new layer of tension. Could this spiritual approach truly combat a technologically advanced alien intrusion? And what unforeseen consequences might arise from delving into these mystical practices? As Antonio prepared for the ritual, a sense of unease grew, a feeling that he was venturing further into uncharted territory, where the stakes were higher, and the path ahead shrouded in even greater uncertainty. The familiar fear of the abduction was now intertwined with a new, more primal fear, the fear of the unknown spiritual forces he was about to confront. The night of the ritual arrived, heavy with anticipation and the scent of unfamiliar herbs. Under the curandero's guidance, Antonio prepared himself, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. The small dwelling was dimly lit by flickering candles, casting dancing shadows that seemed to writhe with unseen energies. Fear mingled with a desperate hope, a fragile belief that this unconventional path held the key to his liberation. He was about to confront not just the memory of the abduction, but something far more profound, something that resonated within his very soul. As the curandero began the ancient chants, a palpable shift occurred in the atmosphere. The air grew thick, charged with an unseen force. Antonio felt a strange tingling sensation spreading through his body, mirroring the unsettling numbness he had experienced during the abduction. The fragmented memories intensified, no longer mere flashes, but vivid, immersive replays, threatening to overwhelm his consciousness. He gripped the curandero's offered hand, grounding himself in the present, bracing for whatever revelation, whatever confrontation, the ritual was about to unleash. This was the turning point, the moment where Antonio would either confront the core of his trauma or be consumed by it. As the curandero's chanting deepened, Antonio felt a dizzying disorientation, the workshop in the hills seeming to dissolve around him, replaced by fleeting glimpses of the metallic room. The emotionless faces of the beings flickered at the edge of his vision, their black eyes boring into him, the telepathic command a ghostly echo in his mind. He fought against the encroaching darkness, clinging to the curandero's hand, the earthy scent of the herbs a grounding anchor in the swirling chaos. Suddenly, a sharp, piercing pain shot through his forehead, originating from the very spot where he suspected the implant resided. He cried out, recoiling instinctively, but the curandero held him firm, chanting louder, the rhythm becoming frantic. The pain intensified, then subsided, replaced by a strange buzzing sensation that resonated throughout his skull, like a trapped insect struggling to escape. In that moment of intense sensation, a fragmented image flashed into his mind, not of the metallic room, but of Rio itself, seen from above, a network of lines pulsing with energy, converging on the favela, on his workshop. A terrifying realization dawned. The implant wasn't just a passive object. It was a beacon, a receiver, perhaps even a controller, focused on him on his home. Just as the vision faded, a familiar voice called out from the darkness outside the dwelling. "Antonio, are you all right?" It was Chico, his friend's voice laced with concern and a hint of trepidation. Chico, initially skeptical, had clearly been drawn back, perhaps sensing the escalating intensity of the ritual, or simply unable to abandon his friend in his time of need. His arrival offered a surprising, if uncertain, alliance in the face of the looming climax. The curandero paused the chanting, his eyes meeting Antonio's, filled with a mixture of concern and grim determination. "The connection is weakening," he stated, his voice low and urgent. "But they know we are here. They are aware." The minor resolution was clear. The ritual was working, the alien influence was being disrupted. But the foreshadowing was ominous. Their actions had not gone unnoticed, and the consequences were likely to be dire. Antonio, fueled by a surge of adrenaline and a chilling certainty, knew the true confrontation was imminent. The ritual had been preparation, a weakening of the enemy's hold. Now he had to face them, not in the sterile confines of their ship, but here, in his world, on his terms, armed with newfound knowledge and a desperate courage. The stage was set for a final, terrifying showdown, the fate of Antonio, and perhaps more, hanging precariously in the balance. "They are aware." The curandero's words hung heavy in the candlelit air, chilling Antonio to the bone more than the alien cold ever had. Chico, stepping fully into the dwelling, his face etched with a mixture of fear and resolve, echoed the curandero's dread. "I saw something in the sky," he stammered, pointing towards the opening in the thatched roof. "Lights, moving fast, not planes." The confirmation solidified their worst fears. The aliens were responding, closing in. Panic threatened to engulf Antonio, but the curandero's steady gaze grounded him. "Fear is their weapon," the healer stated firmly. "We must use courage as ours." He quickly explained the next step, a final, desperate attempt to sever the implant's connection completely, a risky counter-ritual that required immense focus and resolve. This was their last stand, their only chance to break free from the alien influence, and reclaim Antonio's body and mind. Failure meant succumbing entirely, becoming a puppet, a tool in the hands of these emotionless beings with unknown, terrifying consequences for himself and perhaps his community targeted by the beacon. The challenge intensified dramatically, not just against unseen forces, but against time itself. The alien presence felt closer, heavier, a suffocating pressure in the air. The emotional stakes were now profoundly personal and expanded to encompass his friend and the spiritual guide who had risked everything to help him. As the curandero began preparations for the final, more intense ritual, Antonio looked at Chico, a silent understanding passing between them, a fragile alliance forged in the face of unimaginable terror. All narrative threads converged on this small dwelling in the hills, the fate of Antonio, and perhaps more than he knew, poised on the precipice of a terrifying climax. The final ritual began, more fervent, more desperate than the first. The curandero's chants became a raw, primal invocation, the candlelight flickering wildly as if battling an unseen wind. Antonio, fueled by a desperate courage, focused all his will, battling the alien pressure in his mind, the cold dread threatening to consume him. Chico, at his side, offered silent support, a tangible link to the human world, a grounding force against the encroaching alien influence. Suddenly, the buzzing in Antonio's head intensified to a deafening shriek, and he felt a searing heat erupt from his forehead. He cried out, collapsing to his knees, visions flashing before his eyes. The metallic ship, the beings, but also fragmented images of his own life, his favela, Dona Maria's smiling face as he returned her repaired radio. He saw what he was fighting for, what he was about to lose. With a surge of adrenaline, he pushed back against the alien intrusion, channeling his fear into defiance, his despair into raw, untamed will. A blinding flash of white light erupted from Antonio's forehead, momentarily blinding everyone in the dwelling. Then silence. The buzzing stopped. The alien pressure receded. Antonio lay on the floor, gasping for breath, weak but strangely lighter. The curandero knelt beside him, his eyes wide with awe. "It is gone," he whispered, his voice filled with wonder. "The connection is severed." The implant, in that blinding flash, was seemingly neutralized, its purpose thwarted, its hold broken. Antonio had faced the unimaginable, confronted his deepest fears, and emerged, scarred but free. The climax was not a physical battle, but an internal war waged in the realm of spirit and will, a testament to human resilience against the cold, emotionless void of the alien unknown. His story, Antonio La Rubia's story, serves as a chilling reminder. We are not alone, and the battles for our minds and souls may be fought in shadows we barely perceive. Have you ever felt a presence unseen, a whisper unheard? Share your thoughts, your fears, and let us explore the shadows together. In the aftermath of the ritual, Antonio felt profoundly changed. The oppressive weight that had shadowed him for years lifted, replaced by a tentative lightness, a fragile peace. The chilling nightmares receded, replaced by dreams still tinged with the memory of cold metal and black eyes, but no longer laced with paralyzing fear. He returned to his favela workshop, not as a haunted recluse, but as a survivor, carrying the scars of an unseen war, yet imbued with a newfound resilience. Life wouldn't magically revert to its pre-abduction simplicity, but now, Antonio faced it with open eyes, no longer denying the terrifying truth of his past. The bond with Chico deepened, forged in the crucible of shared fear and unwavering loyalty. Dona Elena, her wisdom affirmed, became an even more trusted confidant, her understanding presence a source of quiet strength. Antonio continued his work, mending radios and televisions, but with a subtle shift in perspective. He had glimpsed the vast, indifferent universe beyond, the cold machinery of alien agendas, and returned with a deeper appreciation for the warmth of human connection, the vibrant pulse of his community, the simple beauty of life in the favela. The implant was gone, but the experience remained, etched into his memory, a constant reminder of the unseen battles fought in the silence of our minds. Antonio's story is a chilling echo in the vast chambers of the unexplained, a personal testament to the enduring mystery of alien abduction. It compels us to consider, what if the boundaries of our perceived reality are thinner than we dare to imagine? What if the silence of space holds more than just stars? Reflect on Antonio's journey, consider the chilling questions it raises, and ask yourself, are we truly alone, or are we simply choosing not to see what surrounds us in the shadows?
If you're enjoying this and want to support the channel in bringing more chilling stories like this, any contribution is greatly appreciated. The donation link is just below this video. It's safe, easy, and fast. No registration required. Even the smallest support means so much. Thank you for joining me on this journey.
Third story, Steve Boucher's story, 1970. It began not with a bang, nor a scream, but with a silence so profound it pressed against my eardrums, a void in the usual tapestry of childhood sounds. I was Steve, barely 4 years old in the innocent days of the early 1970s, tucked safely in my bed in what should have been a world of comforting shadows and gentle dreams. But that night, the comforting world fractured, replaced by an unsettling stillness that hinted at something profoundly wrong. Then came the light, an unnatural white glow that bled through the curtains, sharp and cold, unlike the familiar warmth of the bedside lamp. It was a light that hummed with an unseen energy, a vibration that resonated in the very bones of our old house, a silent warning signal in the dead of night. Fear, raw and instinctive, coiled in my small stomach, a feeling far too mature, too knowing for a child my age. This wasn't the monsters of bedtime stories. This was something else, something real and terrifyingly present. Later, only 2 years older, the uneasy quiet returned, heavier this time, laced with the metallic scent of ozone and something else I couldn't name, something alien. The familiar streetlights flickered and died, replaced by an impossible shadow that swallowed the stars. High above, a silent behemoth descended, a craft of impossible size and shape, casting an eerie, multicolored glow that painted the world in shades of fear and wonder. It was then I knew, with a chilling certainty that ran deeper than logic, that the silence and the lights were not random, not childish nightmares. They were a prelude, a terrifying overture to encounters that would forever alter the course of my life, leaving me grappling with questions that echoed in the silence long after the lights had faded. What did they want? And why me? Steve Boucher's world in the early 1970s was painted in the muted tones of suburban normalcy. Quiet streets lined with elm trees, the comforting aroma of Sunday dinners, and the predictable rhythm of school days and piano lessons. Our house, a modest 2-story in a quiet neighborhood, was meant to be a sanctuary, a haven from the unknown. My parents, figures of steadfast normalcy, moved within this world, grounded in logic and routine. Dad, a factory worker, believed in hard work and tangible realities. Mom, a homemaker, filled our days with warmth and a gentle insistence on order. They were good people, loving, but anchored to the familiar, their world a closed loop of predictable days. I, Steve, was an anomaly in their ordered universe. From a young age, I was different, more attuned to the whispers of the unseen, the silences that spoke volumes. I possessed an overactive imagination, or so they said, a sensitivity to the subtle shifts in atmosphere, the unseen energies that pulsed beneath the surface of the everyday. This sensitivity, which they viewed as childish fancy, was, in reality, a finely tuned antenna, unknowingly receptive to frequencies beyond their comprehension. My initial motivation was simply to be a normal child, to fit into their comfortable world, but the silence, the light, the beings, they shattered that fragile normalcy, pushing me onto a path of terrifying discovery. The gray beings, in my first encounter, were like figures from a nightmare, silent, efficient, utterly alien in their purpose. They were instruments of an unknown will, their motivations inscrutable, their actions invasive and deeply unsettling. Later, the tall beings, with their fathomless black eyes, exuded a different kind of power, a silent authority that transcended physical presence. They communicated not with voices, but with thoughts, impressions, visions, hinting at a vast, unknowable intelligence. Their motivation, while veiled, felt purposeful, directed, hinting at a grand design that dwarfed my small, human understanding. These encounters weren't random. They were orchestrated, deliberate, leaving me caught in a cosmic drama far beyond the quiet streets of my suburban life. The silence wasn't just empty. It felt like it was listening. Under hypnosis, the visions sharpened, revealing more than future disasters, a chilling, personal purpose. The tall beings, those black, depthless eyes, weren't merely observers, they were selectors. My abductions weren't random encounters, but pieces of a terrifying, cosmic design, a secret inheritance that set me adrift in a world determined to deny the very reality I was forced to confront. My initial goal, as a child plagued by impossible memories, was simple: to reclaim normalcy. I longed to erase the chilling silence, the unnatural light, the unsettling presence of beings from another world. But normalcy remained elusive, a phantom limb forever out of reach. My parents, anchored in their rational world, became the first, albeit unintentional, obstacle. Their love was a shield, but their disbelief a wall, trapping me in a solitary confinement of fear and fragmented recollections. Doctors and therapists, well-meaning but earthbound, offered diagnoses that dismissed the core of my truth, labeling my terror as childhood anxieties, further isolating me in my alien reality. The visions themselves were another formidable obstacle. Flashes of futuristic cities crumbling, of environmental decay and societal collapse, bombarded my mind, unbidden and terrifying. These weren't just nightmares. They were warnings, cryptic fragments of a future I was forced to witness, yet utterly unable to decipher or prevent. My nights became battlegrounds, sleep a treacherous landscape haunted by black eyes and silent pronouncements. Days were no kinder, punctuated by flashbacks that ripped me from the mundane world and plunged me back into the sterile, unsettling interiors of the craft, the visions always lurking just beneath the surface of my consciousness. Compounding these external and internal conflicts was the chilling realization of my isolation. Sharing my experiences risked ridicule, further alienation, and the label of crazy. Yet the weight of the visions, the insistent alien message to be a witness, pressed upon me a heavy, unspoken burden. My goal to be normal clashed violently with the undeniable truth of my abductions, forging a constant internal struggle. Remain silent and safe within the accepted reality, or speak out and risk everything, driven by a purpose I barely understood, to warn a world that would likely scoff at the message and the messenger. The fragile normalcy I had painstakingly constructed around my life began to crumble not with another abduction, but with the subtle yet undeniable creep of reality mirroring the alien visions. It started subtly, fragmented news reports on the radio about unusual weather patterns, whispers amongst adults about rising sea levels, dismissed as alarmist chatter. But for me, these were not just abstract concerns. They were visceral echoes of the futures I had witnessed within the silent spaceship. Then came the nightmares, no longer just terrifying replays of the abductions, but vivid expansions of the visions themselves. I saw the futuristic cities more clearly now, not just crumbling, but choked by smog, ravaged by resource wars, teeming with a desperate, hopeless populace. The environmental collapse vision intensified, morphing from melting ice caps to parched lands, raging wildfires consuming vast swathes of forests, and desperate migrations of climate refugees. These nightmares bled into my waking hours, no longer confined to the darkness of sleep. Daytime brought waking visions, fleeting but sharp, superimposed on the mundane world. Walking to school, I'd momentarily see the familiar streets replaced by cracked earth and skeletal buildings. Sitting in class, the hum of the fluorescent lights would morph into the unsettling drone of the craft, the blackboard dissolving into scenes of chaos and fire. These weren't just memories resurfacing. They were active intrusions, reality itself fraying at the edges, blurring the lines between the mundane present and the terrifying futures I had been shown. This escalating overlap between vision and reality became the inciting incident, the catalyst that shattered my passive fear and ignited a desperate need for action. Ignoring the visions was no longer an option. They were breaking through, demanding to be acknowledged, understood, and shared. The alien message, once a cryptic whisper, now roared in my consciousness. Act, witness, warn. The time for silent fear was over. The time for action had begun. The immediate consequence of the merging visions was a stark escalation of my internal turmoil. Normalcy evaporated completely, replaced by a pervasive anxiety that clung to me like a second skin. School became an agonizing performance, each lesson punctuated by jarring visual intrusions, the teacher's voice fading into the alien drone, the textbook pages dissolving into scenes of devastation. My grades plummeted further, solidifying my parents' concern, but pushing them further from understanding the true source of my distress. Their attempts to help, though well-intentioned, became another challenge. Therapists, now seeing a visibly deteriorating child, increased their scrutiny, focusing on trauma and psychological breaks, inadvertently reinforcing the narrative that I was mentally unwell, not a messenger of an alien warning. A new, daunting challenge emerged, the need for validation, for someone to believe. My isolation intensified, but now, a desperate undercurrent of urgency propelled me. Silence was no longer a shield, it was a cage. I began to subtly test the waters, dropping veiled hints to classmates, to sympathetic teachers, gauging their reactions. These attempts were met with predictable results: polite dismissals, awkward silences, and sometimes outright mockery. Each failed attempt solidified the mountain of disbelief I faced, yet simultaneously fueled a stubborn resolve. I had to find someone somewhere who would listen, who wouldn't immediately dismiss me as a troubled child. My motivation shifted from simply wanting to be normal to something far more complex and demanding. The alien message, once a vague, unsettling whisper, now resonated with an undeniable force. Witness, messenger, survival. These words became an internal mantra, a driving imperative. The visions weren't just terrifying, they were a call to action, a burden and a purpose intertwined. I was no longer just a victim of alien abduction. I was, perhaps impossibly, a chosen intermediary, tasked with conveying a message of impending crisis to a world stubbornly asleep. This newfound, albeit terrifying, sense of purpose became my primary motivation, pushing me beyond the paralysis of fear and towards a desperate, uncertain quest for understanding and, ultimately, for someone to believe. The escalating visions brought more than just fear. They ignited a volatile internal conflict. The once passive reception of alien messages morphed into a desperate struggle to control the intrusive future, to differentiate vision from reality. Sleep became a battleground for sanity, waking hours a minefield of unpredictable flashbacks, blurring the lines of what was real and what was alien-imposed. This internal chaos bled into my external world, fraying my already strained relationship with my parents. Their concern morphed into a desperate attempt to fix me, pushing for more therapy, stronger medication, inadvertently increasing the pressure to conform to a normalcy that felt increasingly like a lie. The stakes escalated beyond personal sanity. The visions themselves became more insistent, more detailed, more terrifyingly plausible. They weren't just abstract disasters anymore, but scenarios with recognizable locations, familiar faces caught in the chaos, making the impending doom feel disturbingly personal and imminent. This urgency forced a difficult choice: continue to suffer in isolated silence, risking my own unraveling, or break the silence and face the inevitable ridicule, the label of crazy fully cemented. This dilemma became a central subplot, driving my desperate, albeit naive, attempts to find anyone who would listen, who wouldn't dismiss my experiences as mere fantasy. Intertwined with this quest for validation, an unexpected subplot began to emerge. Whispers in the schoolyard, hushed conversations among adults, fleeting news reports, seemingly unrelated events started to subtly mirror elements from my visions. A sudden, unseasonal storm mirroring a vision of chaotic weather patterns, a local factory facing environmental violations echoing a scene of industrial decay. These seemingly coincidental events created a terrifying, subtle connection, hinting that the visions were not just internal torment, but perhaps, horrifyingly, leaking into reality itself, raising the stakes to a terrifying new level. A pivotal moment arrived not in a flash of light or another abduction, but in the hushed quiet of the library. Driven by a desperate need to understand the cryptic alien messages, I buried myself in books about environmental science, future studies, and even the fringe corners of ufology. Weeks blurred into months as I devoured information, seeking patterns, connections, anything that could validate the terrifying visions. Then, a breakthrough. A dusty, obscure text detailing ancient prophecies and folklore, whispers of sky beings and warnings of planetary imbalance. It wasn't scientific validation, but it was something, a thread of resonance, a hint that perhaps humanity had always known, on some primal level, about forces beyond our comprehension. This discovery wasn't comforting, but it was transformative. It shifted my fear into a fragile hope, a nascent belief that I wasn't insane, that my experiences, however impossible, had a context, a history. This fragile hope ignited a change within me. The withdrawn, terrified child began to recede, replaced by a nascent sense of purpose, a quiet determination. The visions, still terrifying, no longer felt solely like personal torment, but like a burden to be carried, a message to be delivered. This internal shift was mirrored externally. A sympathetic librarian, noticing my relentless research and the haunted look in my eyes, cautiously approached. She didn't dismiss my mumbled questions about unexplained phenomena and future disasters outright, but listened with a hesitant, almost fearful curiosity. This tentative connection, a single thread of potential belief in a world of disbelief, became the crucial turning point, the spark that ignited a desperate plan to finally break the silence, to risk everything on the chance that someone, somewhere, might finally listen. The climax was no longer just about understanding the visions, but about finding the courage to share them, to become the messenger I was meant to be, even if the world was determined to shoot the messenger down. The tentative alliance with the librarian, Mrs. Davison, became the fragile stage upon which the prelude to the climax would unfold. Her initial curiosity blossomed into a guarded belief, fueled by my earnest desperation and the unsettling details I revealed, gleaned from fragmented memories and hypnotic regressions. She began to subtly guide my research, pointing me towards obscure journals and forgotten government reports hinting at unexplained aerial phenomena, each discovery a small, flickering candle in the overwhelming darkness of disbelief. This nascent support was a minor resolution in itself, a fleeting moment of validation in a world determined to invalidate my truth. But this fragile hope was met with escalating confrontations at home. My parents, witnessing my increasingly erratic behavior, muttering about future disasters, reacting to unseen stimuli, fixated on dusty books about aliens, grew more desperate. Their fear for my sanity hardened into a resolve to intervene forcefully. Therapy sessions intensified, medication dosages increased, and hushed conversations behind closed doors hinted at more drastic measures. These parental confrontations, though born of love, became minor battles, pushing me further into isolation, making the risk of fully revealing my truth even more terrifying, yet paradoxically more necessary. Subtle foreshadowing began to permeate my daily life. The metallic ozone smell, once confined to the abduction memories, became faintly detectable in the air during moments of heightened anxiety, a phantom scent clinging to my clothes, a constant reminder of the alien presence. The visions intensified, not just in frequency, but in clarity and specificity. They began to coalesce around a single looming event, a massive environmental catastrophe, centered in a location chillingly close to our own town. This impending disaster, a future I desperately hoped to avert, became the ticking clock, the inescapable pressure driving me towards the ultimate confrontation, the climax where I would either break free from the cage of silence or be forever silenced by the weight of disbelief. Final tensions tightened like a vice. My parents, convinced my visions were a descent into madness, issued an ultimatum: commit fully to therapy and medication, or face more structured care. The veiled threat of institutionalization hung heavy in the air, a suffocating cloud over any remaining hope. This parental pressure became the ultimate personal obstacle, forcing me to choose between their desperate, misguided help and the terrifying, impossible truth I carried. Compliance meant silence, the visions buried, humanity potentially doomed. Defiance meant risking everything, my family, my sanity, my freedom, on a message no one wanted to hear. Mrs. Davison, my fragile lifeline of belief, also faced increasing scrutiny. Whispers in the small-town library, concerned looks from colleagues, even veiled warnings from the library board hinted at growing unease about her association with the troubled Boucher boy. Her quiet support became a risky act, her job, perhaps even her reputation, hanging in the balance. This added layer of tension deepened the stakes. My desperate quest was no longer just a personal struggle, but one that could impact the life of the only person who offered a glimmer of validation. The visions themselves intensified their assault. The impending catastrophe, now vividly detailed as a localized industrial disaster with far-reaching environmental consequences, was no longer a distant future threat, but a terrifyingly imminent event days, perhaps hours away. The metallic tang in the air grew stronger, the waking visions more frequent and intrusive, reality itself seeming to fray and dissolve, mirroring the chaotic future. All narrative threads converged, tightened to breaking point. Parental opposition, societal disbelief, fragile alliance, escalating visions, and the crushing weight of the alien message. The stage was set. The climax loomed. The choice, and its terrifying consequences, was unavoidable. The decisive confrontation wasn't with aliens, but with disbelief itself. Standing before the town council, a shaky manuscript clutched in his hand, Steve spoke. His voice, though trembling, resonated with the raw conviction of lived terror. He recounted the silence, the lights, the visions, laying bare the alien warnings of environmental collapse and societal strife. Laughter rippled through the room, skeptical coughs, dismissive murmurs, the wall of disbelief solidifying before him. His parents watched, anguish etched on their faces, their therapy-driven world crumbling at the edges of his impossible testimony. Then the subtle shift, a flickering of the lights in the council chamber, a low, almost imperceptible hum that resonated through the floor. The metallic tang of ozone, faint but undeniably present, filled the air. Doubt flickered in the eyes of the council members, laughter died in throats, replaced by uneasy glances and nervous shuffling. Mrs. Davison, from the back of the room, rose, her voice clear and firm, validating Steve's claims, risking her career, her reputation, everything, on the word of a troubled boy. The climax wasn't an explosion, but a crack in the facade of normalcy. Not everyone believed, not immediately. But the undeniable anomalies, the collective unease, the librarian's unwavering support, these created a fissure in the wall of denial. The resolution wasn't a sudden fix, but a dawning awareness. The seeds of doubt were sown, the message delivered, the impossible whispered into the collective consciousness. The subplots converged. Parental disbelief wavered. Mrs. Davison became a public ally, the looming disaster a terrifying, acknowledged possibility. Thematic closure resonated in the stunned silence that followed his testimony. The alien message, no longer his burden alone, now hung in the air, a chilling call to action. The future the visions had shown was not fixed. It was a choice, and the choice, terrifying and urgent, now lay with them. Listen, look up, believe, change, or face the silence that truly awaits. The immediate aftermath was not a sudden awakening, but a slow, unsettling shift. The town didn't erupt in panic, nor did everyone suddenly believe. But questions lingered in the air, whispers replaced dismissals, and a few, tentatively, began to look up at the night sky with a new kind of unease. Steve, no longer just a troubled boy, became a focal point, a strange oracle in their midst. His parents, witnessing the town's hesitant reaction and Mrs. Davison's unwavering support, began their own slow, painful journey toward acceptance, their love tested, bent, but ultimately unbroken. Mrs. Davison, though facing some professional backlash, stood firm, a quiet beacon of courage against the tide of disbelief. The epilogue isn't one of neat resolutions, but of lingering questions. Did the town, or the wider world, truly listen? Did the warnings avert the predicted disasters? The answer is not a resounding yes, nor a definitive no. Subtle changes began, a greater awareness of environmental issues, hushed discussions about unexplained phenomena, a collective, if hesitant, glance towards the stars. Steve's fate remains intertwined with the unanswered question of humanity's choice. He became a quiet advocate, a persistent voice in the wilderness, forever marked by the silence and the light. His story serves as a poignant reminder. The truly terrifying horror isn't just what might be out there, but our own stubborn refusal to listen, to believe, to look up and acknowledge the whispers of a future we still have the power to change. Listen closely. The silence may already be speaking.
So, what did you think of this story? Did it scare you? Was there a part that gave you chills or stuck with you the most? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below. If you've had a similar experience or have suggestions for improving future videos, let me know too. Thank you for watching and being part of this amazing community. See you in the next story.